everyone. I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. If you haven't already subscribed to our newsletter, I'd like to invite you to sign up through my website at lindanickell.com/happiness hour. Tonight's guest is Valerie Hoffman. Valerie is a full-time working photographer, educator, and workshop leader based in Pennsylvania. Her love for photography spans nearly every subject, and if you browse the Happiness Hour archives, you'll see why she's one of my favorite guests. She can speak knowledgeably and enthusiastically about virtually every aspect of photography. In tonight's session, Capturing the Sparkle of Festive Holiday Lights, Valerie will share some of her favorite tips to help you explore fun ways to capture twinkle and glow, from creative bokeh and intentional blur to fresh perspectives that turn ordinary lights into magical scenes. If you're on Instagram, you can find her at Valerie Hoffman Photography, and you can connect with her through her website, valeriehoffmanphotography.com. Valerie, welcome back to the Happiness Hour. And I went to look. First of all, you're going to get something special in the mail because I believe,
Woohoo.
unless I miscounted, I think this is your 12th appearance as a guest.
I think so.
It's hot. I was like, oh my gosh. So,
Yeah, you've been taking advantage of me.
I did, right? But you know what? You also like volunteer. It's
I
not
do
like
that.
Linda taking advantage of Valerie. I think Valerie enjoys doing presentations.
I do enjoy it.
You
I
you
hope it
do.
comes
And
off.
so can I just throw this out there if anybody's watching and in YouTube land or the interwebs, if you belong to like a camera club or some type of photography group and you're still doing Zooms, Valerie will do it for you. So take advantage.
Yeah,
So
I would love that.
I just pimped you out. So all right. So before we get started, anything you want to share? Like, I'll just throw it out there. So, just the season, photographers are working on their calendars and some books and some classes. So, check out your favorite photographers, and if there's one that has done a happiness hour, please go out and support them. But I know Valerie, you've got something going on. You want to show it?
This is actually last year's.
Oh,
My new one's arriving tomorrow.
oh.
Christy can confirm the website was down, the phones were down. It was awful.
All right.
But it's last year's.
That was last year's.
Yes.
So, okay, so they can get one through your website.
Yeah, they're on the website.
They are.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, all right. Anything else?
No, but so I don't forget the article that you have, there's lots of pictures. I did a blog post and I actually updated it. So it should be the newest blog on my website as
Mm-hmm.
well. So with a bunch of different tips and images.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So if you signed up for the newsletter, it went out. And if you sign up today or tomorrow or next week and you're like, I really want that article, I'll send that to you. So, all right, with that, let me hand it over to you.
all right. We didn't practice this, so
No, but you've been here a few times.
it doesn't mean that the computer thing isn't gonna freak out. So I'm
That
always
there's
afraid, like all these
there's
screens come up now for Zoom, and I'm like, I don't want to click the wrong one and make everything go.
yeah. I see no Christmas lights in this picture.
Hang on a minute. This now I'm starting to, because these are tips and these are important tips. So, and Christy gets credit for this because we were shooting Amazing Lights that you'll see in a minute. And she said, turn around. And there's the old turn around. And the sky was just doing this amazing, really cool thing. And so, my first tip for any holiday lights outdoor is show up before sunset. Because if you can get a beautiful sunset and light. So this is what was happening. And then I grabbed people and like, let's just find something to put in front of it. And it got this really cool beam and everything. So, Yeah, look behind you. That would be a good tip that I didn't have listed. But to show up early through sunset because lights will be visible at that time. And then I think, here was another great sunset, when we were just arriving somewhere for lights. So I would do that. And then the glow afterwards as we turn into blue hour can be really beautiful. And then you still have a little blue hour here. That's the best time to shoot your architecture and definitely holiday lights. Because if you look here, so a lot of these, 99% are from Longwood Gardens, and I ended up leading 2 workshops there in the last 2 weeks, three in the last 2 weeks. So, but blue hour, and you see the beautiful blue hour is dusk. It's the after the sun sets, and you just have kind of blue in the sky before it gets totally dark. And see how you have this pretty, separation. And as it gets darker, the blue will get darker. But look at the difference. Now, yeah, this is a different crop, but when it's black, like you have no detail, you have no foreground detail, you have like just lights. And it's a lot harder to get a good exposure and just to see things and everything, even to focus. So I would shoot as much as I could, as quickly as I could during blue hour. But our Christmas workshop last year that I led, we had rain and fog. And so it was totally dark here, but there was then this glow in the atmosphere. So atmosphere is really pretty awesome for when you're trying to shoot holiday lights. So and I'm going to use like just do a variety of tips because I didn't really have very long to put anything together. I was just going to reuse something and then I thought, no, I already have one. You go back in the recordings. So I wanted to make it different. So these are all newer images. But a lot of the images that I shot, in fact, almost all of them, I bracketed by 2 stops. And then merge them together as HDRs because there are a lot of really dark and really bright areas. Even in this scene, you have this nuclear, light right below here. And I want detail there. I don't want that blown out. But then, in the upper parts where the lights are far away, I want to be able to see that too. And I don't want a terribly noisy images because I'm trying to light it, bring up the exposure in that. So that would be a big tip is to actually bracket so that you know that you're getting good exposures. And, composition wise, shoot verticals and horizontals. Do both. You never know what you're going to like better. So I have a bunch of different, kind of compositional tips and lighting tips. And, if you have a scene with a lot of lights, you might be able to use, say, aperture priority. That's usually what I'm in. But when you get, some other scenes where there's just a lot of darkness, you might need to go fully manual and just kind of work with that. And Linda, you can let me know if there's any questions in between any of these. But for anybody so Longwood Gardens is in Pennsylvania, South Pennsylvania, Southeast, and I live about an hour and 15 minutes away from there. And it's truly beautiful. But I'm also on the teaching team too, so I've gotten to lead a couple workshops. But this is part of a new conservatory, and it's just really beautiful, or ugly according to some people, but I think it's pretty cool. So it's something really neat to see. Now there's a couple tips in here. So this is a big scene, right? And then I moved in and got a little closer, and there's a really neat gazebo in the back here that had all those other lights you just saw right in the background. And then I decided to just get in close on the gazebo. The theme this year was jewels, something like that. So things look like diamonds in that. So you have 3 very different exposures here or compositions here, basically standing at the same place. Had I not done HDR and bracketed 2 steps over and under, I never would have got all the detail here and the detail in the back and everything. I mean, so for scenes like this, you absolutely have to do that.
Valerie,
And,
oh,
uh-huh,
go back to that one
this
photo.
one,
Yeah.
uh-huh.
So I just want to get Karen's question in for her. She wants to know, are you shooting with a wide angle lens on the big scene, on this big scene?
Um, I am. So here's my info up in the left. And I'm micro 4/3. So if you're full frame, you would double this number. Okay. So 31 millimeters for me is 64, 62. Good math there, Val. Um, Full frame. And if you're a crop sensor, you're somewhere in between.
Okay. So another question, just because it's right
Uh-huh.
here. Joe wants to know, do you change, sorry, it bounced. Do you change your white balance for these night shots or do you leave it in auto white balance?
That's a good question where I have a sample coming up, but I mostly stayed in auto white balance because there's a good variety of colors and I don't know if that's fair to say, most lights at a display like this are probably a little more daylight balanced. But you'll see some where I left it for daylight when they were really more tungsten because I liked the warmer glow. So that's a really good question. I would try, on my auto white balance in Olympus, you have an option to keep it warm. And so I generally always use that because I'd rather things be a little warmer, especially with lights. One other thing to think about, um, I noticed in this scene by accident, so I'm bracketing, but they're longer exposures because it's dark. All these things are floating, and I didn't notice it, but they're moving. So any motion that you have, you're going to have to use a faster shutter speed to help freeze that. Because if I had my little blue diamond all over the place, then they wouldn't merge together right. But also, if you're shooting strands of light, like these trees, excuse me, are made of strands of light. If it's really windy, then they're going to be blurry unless you use a fast shutter speed. So it's pretty challenging that way then. So if you can pick a night that's not windy for sure, unless it's just static lights like in the background. But here's another one where I didn't realize it. It's really dark. Like this looks easy to see, but it's dark. And then these really bright lights, all these little snowflakes that are on the water were floating as well. So again, they're just kind of moving. And so when I merged them, I used the deghosting feature to, just pick that and not get blurs. And that's Lightroom talk. So, I watch a lot of people as I teach, they find one composition, they shoot it, and then they move on. But I always like to challenge people to shoot at least 5 different compositions before you move. And so here was kind of I call it a diamond. I don't know what it officially is, but they had moved it into this courtyard. And I noticed there was a reflection. And so I just moved all around the barricades and tried a bunch of different compositions because you never know what you'll like. And these are very different images. Again, doing verticals and horizontals. So just, a little tip that way, moving in closer, zooming back out. And here's an image that's behind Christy's head. We send her out to scout because this is a little bit of a walk. And that's the conservatory that, I was kind of mentioning, and we had the lights by, but they have some neat lights usually in these trees. And so framing, I think, is a really, adds kind of, so you have lights around your subject. One of the things you want to watch, and hopefully I do that well in the images, is minimize the black areas of the scene, where there's no lights at all, and just try and compose in a way where there's a lot of light filling. So even here, we were leaving. I just about had no energy left, but I'm like, oh, look, if I stand over here, I can get the trees to frame the tree in the back. And okay, one more, the old one more. So that minimizes all this, dead space here. So, and nobody asked, but you can see the apertures up there. So when I have a scene I want something sharp in the foreground and in the back, then I'll shoot probably around f11. And f11 will also, on most lenses, give you these little starbursts without having to use a star filter. And if you're shooting like a super wide angle lens, you could probably get little starbursts at f4 or something. So those are little tips that if you don't have a filter, which I'll show you some examples with a filter in a little bit. But here's a Laowa super wide angle lens, so a 6mm, and I get the starburst no matter what. But framing, just try and find neat things to surround your subject. So we had a tree back there and just some foreground stuff. And, I wanted to make sure that this was also in focus. So be careful where you focus. Now, I don't know what this is supposed to be. I guess it's supposed to be a diamond. This is this year's centerpiece. I think it's atrocious, but I decided to shoot it. So framing with all these little palm branches around, and this was, just as it was starting to get dark. So I thought that, makes it look a little pretty. And this walkway again is kind of framed with the lights and the pathway leading you in. So pathways are always really neat. And here I did use a star filter to add that little extra sparkle, a little extra something, something. And for those that are new to star filters, they generally come in about three different types: a four, like a cross screen, which is just like 4 points, and then a six, which is what I believe this is, and then an 8X. So, and you can usually buy sets of all three or just individuals. If you're just going to buy one, I'd buy the four. The others get, a little crazy. Like here's an 8 point. And I like this, but you get some little diffractions and things. It's kind of cool. You might either love it or hate it. But again, just some kind of framing, things all around the scene, minimizing the dark areas here. Okay, there might be some screaming very quickly. A cat just breached my larger barrier. So here's a scene. It's not funny because I have more hard drives than, I don't know, the government has. And if they go flying, right, Christy? Ugh. So here's a Christmas tree with nice framing. I just stepped back behind the palm trees. Now, what I didn't realize at first is that this is actually a spinning tree and it moves really slowly. But so now I wanted to show the motion. And so then moving down to 10 seconds, um, then you could actually capture the motion. I did some at 30. And if any, well, some people that go around Longwood, you can't use a tripod inside. So any of these were within after hours on a workshop where you could. But, so you have the spinning now, just move all around, try different compositions. You've got some framing here with these lights hanging down. You've got that crazy star filter going on. Some then stepping back kind of in a doorway and the framing that way. Again, longer exposures because it's really hard to not have blur in the tree. So you just have to roll with it or go to a horribly high ISO to freeze it. Another tip for lights is a lot of displays are kind of flashing and the lights keep changing and they go from different colors and patterns and things. So if that's happening, you're going to need to minimize your shutter speed. Like if they're just not changing, you could do several seconds, but like this would hold and then it would start flashing and changing and doing checkers and things. So then you have to go to like a higher ISO and a faster shutter speed. And probably shoot wide open. So you just have to kind of get a feel for what the lights are doing. Like these, so that's that whole new conservatory and then the original ones in the back here. These were constantly changing and they only stayed on for a second or two in a solid color. So, now I'm down to half-second exposures to try and, not because they'll all get muddy. Like it'll just be white, if you go from color to color. So here's just a couple different ones. And, shooting wider. So this is the wide angle lens, the 8 mm, and then, zooming in a little bit closer. And then when there's changing lights, I just keep shooting to get through all the patterns and things. So, and I'm again bracketing because, and this one's a single exposure, but because I want detail on the inside of this beautiful place. It's like a floating jewel. And then the detail outside as well. And then just kind of looking the other way. So this is, instead of the lights that were behind Christy with the blue, now they're orange this year. But, and then just kind of shooting straight in there. Now here I have just from F11, the nice little starburst there. And I included that in the foreground just to kind of fill up some space there. And then here I added a filter, gives that little extra pop. And then kind of moved around. You can shoot through lights. I would say make sure that the ones closest to you are in focus, unless you can be really close with a really wide aperture. And I'll show you maybe some examples of that in a little bit. But again, just moving around for compositions. And I don't know what you guys have, but I know you have some neat displays. Don't you in Austin have some pretty neat displays? Somewhere?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. We do. Yeah, we have what we have. We call it the Zilker Christmas tree. And honestly, I think we have the Trail of Lights. And I'll be honest, it's been a while since I've been down there. Um, so I
Yeah.
couldn't really tell you.
Just
But
yeah,
yeah,
move
but you
around
know what?
close, far.
Right. But just driving around over the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 days in different going through little towns, everybody's got their Christmas lights up. So you're going to be able to find them anywhere. So, um,
And some places really go crazy, like the vacation. And so, and the more you get into a scene, then the smaller things are and the less impactful. And that's why I'm showing these all different things. But I would just zoom into some neat different features.
yeah.
So, and here's a little more kind of framing, but here's that tree in the background that's spinning. So I have some sharp ones in the foreground and some nice framing, and you got some nice reflections here. So, take your time to look around and work on your compositions. So those other ones were from that way, looking this way, and then kind of balanced off with those other two. These are little fountains. You can see a little bit of the motion from the water. And again, vertical, horizontal, long exposure, let it spin. So, and then here's, fast shutter speed, a fifth of a second, that would freeze that. So I would shoot both ways. And if I'm using a star filter, I would shoot with and without the filter. So you have a variety. Now here, like this is the one behind me. This is just it's the new Vario filter that I got, and it's pretty crazy. So I'd go easy on that, but I think it's kind of pretty. I think this would make a pretty Christmas card. And Joe, I think that was you that answered or asked this question. So I kept this in daylight, and they're clearly very warm images. And some of the other conservatory ones, outside, I like that warmer feel. That feels more Christmassy to me. Um, if you were in auto white balance, you could, scooch it a little to the warm side, whatever you feel comfortable with. I like to try and get the image the way I want it to look when I'm shooting, so I don't have a lot to play around with. And so I feel like I'm in love with the image as I'm seeing it on my camera. So, and like here's a little bit closer, but now I backed up a little more to include this little fireplace that's on the right. So, never stop trying to compose, and then just, finding you got the nice sparkle behind the presents, come from a different angle. It's going to get ugly. So, all different things. This is embarrassing. Like I'm live, and now this cat's like behind my desk, but all different things going on. Low angle, trying to get under the ropes. Another view of this, I kind of like this with the fountains in foreground. So again, just moving around. And again, I do really like a starburst look on the lights that, feel obnoxious. All right, we got a lot of spinning trees. Oops. Okay, here you go, Joe. So this was keeping it on daylight, and then this was auto white balance. Um, and that just seems too cold to me. It's kind of neat, but now maybe this could be a little less yellow, a little less bold, but I kind of like that really warm, glowy feeling. So it's really, it's an art. It's a personal taste. So another thing that I love to do, like you want to think about your aperture. So a lot of those that you were just looking at was more of a stop down aperture. So I would have some depth of field, but here I used the nifty 50, and I focused in on this little cookie on the plate, but had the lights in the background then at 1.8 just went into these really lovely bokeh balls. And that little girl walked right into the scene. And I thought it was looked kind of neat with her there anyway. But so shooting, when you come up to a scene, like, and this is one of those drive-by holiday, houses, I want to decide what aperture you're going to use. And here I used a wider one and let the lights in the background go soft. And the same thing here, like f2.2. And even here, I thought this was neat. Shoot super wide aperture and then get the row of soldiers out of focus. So I moved myself there. But I just really like that. So the bokeh lights behind it, they go that really super softness. And it's great for portraits. So I don't do portraits. Linda said I do just about anything, but I don't do many people except on workshops. But here on this one workshop, we all took turns. I did portraits of everybody with the pretty lights behind them, and then they threw me in there. So this was a long, long time ago, 2014. So, but yeah, so here's another thing when you use a really wide aperture, if you have So these are trees made out of lights, and I was right up against lights of a tree shooting through to another tree. And so the ones, and I'm focusing on the trees in the background. So now anything against the lens, like everybody's always afraid to do that. It seems so wrong, but anything right in front of the lens is going to do that neat bokeh thing. Come here, baby. So so you can do some really kind of neat things with that just by, again, having a really wide aperture. And it can be, that works with a telephoto lens, whatever lens fits what you're trying to shoot, but wide open and those lights right against the lens. And then just moving around so they kind of look nice and not, really obnoxious. And this was something I set up in the living room. So I used, back in Canon days, my 70 to 200. And I had a candle sitting there, and this is just a tree in the background. And I moved myself back so I could be at 200 millimeters or almost. So I'm at 150. And that made those lights super large. And it just was a real pretty background for this candle. Come here, you stinker. All right. This is Scamp now in the picture. So on your Christmas tree, you could have Christmas balls floating around. And again, when I find a display, when I find a nice ornament, you want to look for one hanging out. Like if you're going around and there's a lot of trees, you want an ornament that's out at the edge of the branch, but you want to shoot it at an angle that you have other lights behind it. And it's just till you get used to that, it's a little weird. But so Longwood is a botanical garden and there are always flowers, not just lights. But I did that same thing. So wide open aperture, and I'm really close. This is a smaller flower. I know Linda or maybe Karen would know what it is. But so I'm really close to this flower. So everything in the background is going to be super soft. And that's how I shot this, just changing around differently and zooming in. The more zoom, the more telephoto, the bigger those light balls will be in the background. So I just think it's beautiful, to be able to do that. And you can do this in your living rooms or just out wherever. And then you could just take some shots of just the out of focus, like turn the lens out of focus with the lights and get some neat effects there. That pattern, I'm like, what in the world is going on? But that pattern is me turning it out of focus with a star filter on. But, close-ups of candles with the star filter, I think can be pretty. Add that little sparkle, little something, something. Again, back to that crazy filter. This is a really old Koken filter that's just obnoxious, but sometimes it can look okay. And then I use another filter. So this is not necessarily lights, but it's great. You'll see some other examples. It's a kaleidoscope filter where you have the center image sharp and then that same image kind of all etched around it. And it can look beautiful for shots like close-ups of lights, presents, flowers. Again, the theme this year at Longwood was gems. And so they had this huge place setting and everyone had this like giant gem on it. Don't you wish? But so I'm like, eventually I get bored and throw something on and start trying to play. So this is just a tree with that same kaleidoscope filter on. And I threw it on for those lights. And shoot during the day. So I'm getting, closer maybe to the end, but during the daytime, see, it's so different between the day and night, but you can get some real pretty shots too, just using a wider aperture, letting things go soft in the background. Framing again. So this is what it kind of looked like in the daylight. Get your poinsettias in there. And so see this scene. So you're not allowed tripods at this point. I'm there in the day and I wanted kind of everything focused. So here was the first shot. I focused on the poinsettias and see how everything's not sharp in the background, right? But if you do focus stacking, which, and again, I'm not making a thing about Olympus, but I could do that right in camera. So I set it for 5 images and then just held still, and it quickly shot 5 images, and then it merged it together for me. That's a JPEG. And now I have everything in the scene in focus. So if you're in a place where you don't want to carry a tripod, it's a pain in the rear end, you could do focus bracketing. Most newer cameras have that. And you could merge them together in Photoshop or like Helicon Focus. Or if you have an Olympus, you just press a button and you got it. So I think they should make me a spokesperson or something. But these are different examples using focus stacking. So now I'm handheld. I don't have to go to a horrible high ISO, and I can get everything in the scene sharp from front to back at f5.6. Now here's just an example. So this is this ugly thing again, right? And I'm like, I don't even know what to do with it, especially in the daylight. But as I'm sitting here bored while someone I'm giving a private lesson to is loving on that ugly thing, I thought, huh. So right in front here are all kinds of orchids. I'm like, well, what if I just use it as a background? So, you can think outside the box and try and do something creative. And so I just used it as a background out of focus, and then even did an abstract kind of with it as well. Another thing for Sparkle is storefronts. So we have little towns that you could go to that all the storefronts get all decked out and everything. I did a white vignette around this because I'm not learned enough, put it that way, to do textures and all that other fun stuff. But so any little downtowns can have really neat lights and window fronts. And this, so what in the world is that? So this, I didn't do this year. They didn't have a single, so this is from a lighted tree that you could walk under. So, and we're underneath it and looking up. And so I have my camera on a tripod. I laid it flat so the camera's facing up. I loosened the head and then just slowly spun it in a circle. And that's what I got. So I used a 1.3 second exposure so I'd have time to spin it without having to make it go crazy. So you could do some really cool things, and you could just jerk it with your arm. Like, I love intentional camera movement for some things. You never know what you're going to get. So, that little extra sparkle could be just to play. And double exposure. So a lot of cameras have double exposures. Now here's my negative for Olympus. You can only do 2 without doing like all these overlays, but try and embrace that. I did a picture with out of focus lights, and then I overlaid it over top of these trees. So you can do neat things like that, like shoot a neat texture or something, and check if your camera has the overlays or double exposures, and maybe use that feature. And by all means, embrace weather. So it can be miserable when it's cold and wet. I mean, you guys are just having fall, and we're like in the dredges in poor Michigan. Like, we get it. But here it was a rainy day, and it was actually pouring. I'm like, oh, but I had a umbrella and went outside and just look at the reflections. So, that's beautiful. And that's a different image from what 90% of other people are going to get, because they're sitting at home with their hot chocolate and their blanket around them watching Hallmark, and you're out doing your thing. So, and here's another, just the zoom. I did this for Happy Holidays, and this is my kind of last one, but I could do some other like bokeh lights or whatever if I went too quickly or anything. But do we have any questions?
Yes. Is that the last one?
It
Okay.
is, and then that. So
One, you can finish that up, and then I will ask the one question.
do what?
Do you want to? Okay. You want to take your screen down?
Sure.
All right.
Stop
Let
sharing.
me find my question. All right. This is Kathy's question. Are monopods treated the same way in situations like this garden as tripods? So with no monopods and no tripods?
So rules vary depending where you go, but at Longwood Gardens, a monopod is a tripod, so you
Yep.
can't use them.
Yep.
And if you think you're smart and you're carrying a rolling bag and you have your tripod bungeed for when you go outside and you just accidentally set your camera on there and trigger the shutter, someone in a lovely green shirt will give you the finger wag.
The finger wag. because
I only got yelled at twice yesterday.
I
So
was gonna say, ask her how she knows that, y'all. Okay, that is it as far as questions. So
that's
um,
it.
that's it. I know. Well, a lot of these people know how to do this, so this is just a kind of a inspiration. It's timely because y'all, it's the holidays and the lights are all over the place. Oh, and by the way, Valerie, thank you for doing this for me.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it. All right, next week is the last session of the year, and I'd like to invite you to share one of your photos that you created in 2025 that pushed you outside your comfort zone in our session called Outside the Frame, Your 2025 Creative Leap. If you'd like to submit a photo to share, send it to me at info@lindanickell.com and join us next week to share your story. Until next time, go out and create something beautiful, and I hope that we see you again soon.